Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
In the last class, we did talk about the prime cost, the works cost or the cost of production, the cost of sale. What are the constituents of cost of sale? What are the constituents of cost of production? What are the constituents of even prime cost, and so on and so forth. We talked about the direct materials and we talked about the direct expenditures and so on and so forth. Now, let us take for example that let us assume that we talk about what do you call it as number 1, we talked about factory overhead. Now, let us assume that let us take one example. Let us assume we pay what is called as rent out there, that is basically an overhead out there. I pay for my factory supervisor. I run a recreation facility for my employees. I run a recreation facility for my employees or staff out. I run what is called as I operate some kind of a healthcare facility for my staff out there. Now, all these please include involves a cost out there which have to be absorbed by the end product. Now, it is a single product company. The company manufactures only one product. Very straight and simple, all costs just load it to that product, arrive at the final cost of the product, we arrive at it as overhead and then go on and so forth. Single company, single product. Now, imagine a company which manufactures what you call it as 3 products out there. Product A, product B and product C. Now, question is how do I divide the cost out there? How do I divide? So, that is what we call it as apportionment of overheads. Now, it is always a bigger challenge. What happens? Apportioning, dividing, let me use the word simple English word, dividing this cost out there among these 3 products A, B, C is always a bigger challenge out there. What is the basis on which I have to divide these basic costs out there? Now, I have listed the costs in the previous sheet out here, these are the different costs. Do I divide it now on the basis of what do you call it as? Sir, somebody says no, divide it on the basis of what do you call it as number of units. Yes, possible. Why should it be number of units? Why can't it be value of the per unit, value per unit, I would say value per unit. Why can't it say overall value? Now, in this particular case, I would say if I say rent for that matter, why should it be value? Why can't it be as per the space occupied by each of the product? Now, if I go back and say recreational facility, now there is a bigger challenge. Rent is easy, I could do it. Recreational facility, what do I do it? Recreational facility, I can't be it's the number of employees and I can't basically measure. Or for example, healthcare facility. Now, for example, I have to have a basis when I do what is called as these kind of dividing or apportioning these overheads out there. So, now that is always a challenge in dividing these overheads. Now, when I, for example, supposing I say the healthcare cost out there, healthcare cost in this particular case, supposing the recreational facility cost, supposing I divide it between the three products in the on the basis of the space occupied by the three products out there in the form of manufacture. One of the production managers in charge of one of the product is going to shout back at you saying that agreed I occupied so much of space, doesn't mean but I don't use my recreational facility so much because my entire facility is automated, I don't have even any labor out there. My labor is there are only 1 or 2 people out there, whereas for product C there are 100 people and they might use a recreation facility more, I don't even use the facility more. Or for example, if you say let us look at, then you go back and say no, I will refine it, I will divide the recreational facility on the basis of number of employees that each product is taking. Beautiful. Then if you adopt the same thing for the healthcare, then one of the other product fellows will say, though the number of employees looks very good, the employees working on my product are relatively younger, they don't need much of healthcare facility, whereas the employees who are working on a legacy product A are all very old, are all very old, might need more and more money, more and more healthcare. So they might be using the facility more as compared to my employees. So why are you charging the cost of my product out there? Because then each one of it becomes a profit center. So what is happening? Each one of it is treated as a profit or cost and pre-profit center out there. So what is the objective of every production manager out there in charge of a product is to produce the product at as less cost as possible so that he can make more money. So you apportion these overheads, divide these overheads on some basis which he is not able to buy, then he is going to basically keep shouting back at you and there is going to be always perennial cold war between what do you call it as in your shop floor and so on out there. Because most of the major part of the cost are all overheads. I took a simple example of 4. There can be multi-million overheads. For example, I might run a bus facility to pick up my employees from whatever when they come to the shift in the morning. I might have a security staff at the factory out there. I might have an admin overhead. I may have an entire office system which is going to support out there. Now, if I divide the office cost among the 3 products, it's perfectly fine equally. Now, product A manager will say my product does not need any marketing, my product is basically a necessity product, so it is getting picked up, it is just moving out there, whereas product B and C needs a little more what do you call it as managing of the product out there, so there is more effort involved, so why are you dividing it equally? So what happens? Dividing this cost is always a challenge. Administrative costs. Now, for example, if they say the sales promotion team or the top management goes on a world tour to promote the product and come back. Now, I divide the cost among these 3 products equally. Beautiful. Now, product A manager will say my product no need for promotion, already doing very well. Product C doing very badly, that needs promotion. So, why are you charging the cost to my product out there? So, because you are charging the cost to my product's profitability is low. So, what happens? This apportioning this cost out there, as I indicated in the wrote in the next slide out there, next page out there, apportioning these overheads out there is always a challenge. Now, what happens? Traditionally, one of these arbitrary measures, I would not say use the word arbitrary, let me rephrase the word out there. One of these measures out there which are more or less accepted, not totally arbitrary, with some basic logic out there, was being used for dividing the overheads out. But today we have moved into a situation where we are trying to use a little more scientific method of apportioning these overheads, and that method of apportioning the overheads is what we call it as activity based costing. That method of apportioning the overhead is what we call it as activity based costing. Now, let us do one thing, let us go back to the slide, let us look at traditionally how were we sort of looking at these apportioning these overheads out there, and we will take up some numericals out. We will also take up some numericals. I have put in some numericals like yesterday, like in the last class. We will take up some numericals and we will go. Conventional system, they were sort of they adopted basically what you call it as 3 basic steps out there, a series of steps out for allocating these overheads out. Now, all the overheads are to be assigned to the production center or the service centers out. The service center will reassign the cost to the production center. See what happens. There are production centers, there are service centers out. Now, there are some other costs. All the costs are assigned to the production center or the service center. Then the cost of the service center gets reassigned to the production centers, and then the final cost of every production center is calculated. We have an example. I'll deal with this with the help of an example out. Normally, when we do this, we do what is called as when we all the costs are divided between the primary between the production and service departments, we call it as primary distribution, and then we go in for a secondary distribution out. That is first step in allocation. All overheads for an accounting period are assigned to service and production center. That is what I stated right in this slide also, and I am restating the same thing out. All these costs are distributed. For example, sir, what is that cost out? Let us take an example. In a production shop floor, in a company which is production intensive, I will have a timekeeping office out there, because the timekeeping office takes care of the punching when the employee gets in, when the employee gets out, and so on and so forth out. Now, when the employee gets in and punches the card, not only the employees related to production enter the factory, the people who are in charge of the administrative activity also enter the factory, the people who are in charge of stores also enter the factory, the people who are on providing the canteen facility also enter the factory, and so on, and everybody punches the card out. So, when everybody is punching the card, what is the time office doing? The time office is providing service not only to the employees of the production department, it is also providing service to the employees of the service departments out. So, what do? I take the total cost of the time office and allocate it based on the number of employees in each of the departments. For example, production department A has 10 employees, I allocate some part of it. Production department B has 20 employees, I allocate some part of it. The administrative department C has some employees, I allocate something. The canteen has some employees, I allocate something. So, what is happening? I am allocating in that ratio out there. But the canteen is not a profit center, it is not selling any product, it is not making a profit. The administrative activity is not selling any product, it is not making a profit. So, what happens? Once I allocate this time office cost to these 4, then I reallocate the cost of the as the administrative cost among these 3 out there, or the canteen among these 3. Sorry. Why the canteen? Because canteen is also used by staff of as the staff of the administration activity also. So, I allocate the cost of the canteen between production department A, production department B, and the administrative department C. Then I go next step, I take the administrative cost, total administration cost, and allocate it to production department A and production department B, and basically close it. We have an example, we will take that out. So, that is the way we basically allocate the cost, the second level of allocation. You see, allocating the service cost in the prescribed manner, that is exactly what I said. First, allocate these either cost to the service centers that provide the most services, and then again rework on allocating the cost of that service center. Choose the service center which provides the maximum service. Timekeeping office maximum, next canteen, next administration. So, in that order you will go. Sir, you can argue the canteen is also used by the timekeeping staff also, agreed, but what happens? You can start with the canteen, allocate the canteen cost to the timekeeping, administration, and production department A and B, and then take the timekeeping cost and then do it, or you could do the either way. Normally what happens, we take the cost of what do you call it as the department, service department which provide the maximum service out there and start with that allocation out there, that is all. You could do the other way around also. Then finally we allocate it to the production department. We will take an example out there. I think I have an example illustration out there of the conventional system in this particular case. Now you see there are 3 production departments A, B and C. Service departments, there is a stores, there is time keeping and accounts, there is a power, there is canteen out there and there is a cost out there. Now historically, conventional system, traditionally, the costs were allocated on a basis, the basis is given out here. One of the basis, there is HP of the machine, HP is horsepower of the machine, number of workers and the value of stores requisitioned out there, value of the stores requisition. One of these bases is used for allocating this cost out there. Historically, this is what is being used. Now, is it wrong or right? Well, it is yes and no. Why it is yes and no? Some places right, some places wrong. For example, let us take now the cost of stores in this case is $2,000 whatever out there. Now the value of the amount of requisition from the stores, the cost of the stores is 2000 operating the stores department. The value requisition from the stores is for department A is 2500, for department B it is 1500, for department C it is 1000. So ideally what do? You allocate it on the basis of 5:3:2 out there, that is 25:15:10. I allocate it on the basis of that and then be done with it. Traditionally, conventionally, yes, accepted, fine, over. But one can argue the cost incurred by the stores department need not be based on the value, can be based on the number of times you send a request to the stores, because every time you send a request to the store, the amount of paperwork they have to do is there. So that is what adds to the cost. So it need not be based on the value, it can be based on number. Why? Because somebody can say, department A can say, I send a request only once and I withdraw all the $2,500 worth of goods from the stores out there. So paperwork is done only once. Whereas department C, every time they request to do a paperwork and request $100 worth of material out there. So they have 10 requests in the process, whereas department A has only 1 request. So the what is the cost of 2000 incurred by the stores, for department A it is only once, whereas for department C it is 10 times out there, because the number of times it is requested. It can be. Now what happens? There is always some kind of a turmoil which basically happens in the conventional system out there. Conventional system uses one of these are not arbitrary, let me make it very clear, though I use the word there. These are not arbitrary, these are based on some basic logic out there, and they have been adopting one of these measures and doing it, and then there is always basically discontentment, because what we call it as I may not be appreciative of it, and as I said, value and number can vary out there. So this is now, these are the typical problems of a conventional system. But however, we will learn how the conventional system works before we move into the improvised activity based costing system. Let us sort of work on this particular problem. What you see on the screen, APC has 3 production departments and 4 service departments. Now apportion the cost to the service departments to the production departments out. How do you do it? Now let us sort of look at it out here. Let me go back to my typical Excel sheet out here. So let us look at the illustration. I am going to solve it with the help of an Excel out. Now let us look at, I am going to do what you call it as typical secondary distribution in this particular case. I am going to write down what you call it as typically the secondary distribution is what I am going to do. Secondary distribution. Let me look at what you call it as the let me look at the details out there in terms of what do you call it as in terms of what do you call it as the costs out there, costs. and then let me say the next is basis, and I am just going to keep the total out here, and I have 3 production departments out there. I have what is called as the production departments out there. I will have that is typically A and then B and then C out there, and then B out. Okay. Now, let us look at the in this particular case the production department. Now, as per summary, I am going to talk about as per summary out there. Let us look at the service department. What is service department? Stores, timekeeping and accounts, power and canteen out there are the 3 basic aspects that we basically see in this particular case out. Now, first I will start with service department. Let us start with stores as a service department. Because if you look at stores in this particular case, stores has what do you call it as the cost of the stores will be divided between these 3 departments out there. That is what I said, it is a secondary distribution what we are doing out here, straight away the secondary distribution out there. I am not allocating to the service department and then reallocating in this particular case. I am not doing the primary distribution in this case. I am directly getting into the secondary distribution. That is what I have mentioned out here, secondary distribution. Am I right with you? Yeah. I am not even getting into the primary distribution. This is the typical conventional system what they did. So, source department, and so how do I allocate the stores? Value of what do you call it as value of stores requisition, that will be in the ratio of what do you call it as 5:3:2 out there. That is the value, that is how I basically look at in this particular case. I am basically apportioning it. So, what is the total value of the stores requisition in this particular case? The total value that is to be accommodated is 2000 out here. I will basically just say this figure into what do you call it as 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 2 is 10 divided by what do you call it, sorry, into 5 divided by 10 out there. That is all what I am going to do. So, I will say 1000 rupees worth of stores just goes to what do you call it, production department, a simple straight allocation out here. I will again do the same thing in this particular case out here. I will say the same $2000 out here into 3 divided by 10 out here, and that is perfectly all right. And then this is perfectly all right in this particular case, $2000 out here into 2 divided by 10 out there, and that is gone out here, straight and simple. Next, I move to the allocation. Let us say what is the next service department, in this particular case timekeeping out there, timekeeping and accounts, timekeeping and accounts out here. I am just going to wrap the text out here, timekeeping and accounts in this particular case, timekeeping and accounts as $1500 out here, and this is just sorry, $1500, I am sorry, $1500 out here, $1500 is the total, and this is just allocated. Timekeeping is based obviously on the number of employees, so I allocate it on the base of number of employees. You see number of workers, 20:15:15, so 4:3:3. I mean on the basis of number of workers, that is in the ratio of 4:3, and that is all what happens in this case. And as I said, I am doing only the secondary allocation out here. So, what do? I take this 15 into 4 plus 3 is 7, 7 plus 3 is 10. So, into 4 divided by 10 out here, and then next what are we looking at in this particular case out here? In this particular case out here, I am just going to move to the I am just going to move here, and then I will just say this is the amount out here into 3 divided by 10 out here, and it's exactly going to be the same out here, because 3 into 3, that's what is 450 out here. Simple and straight, over. Now let's look at the other service department, that is power out there. Power, the cost of power in this particular case is about 800 is the cost of power. Now what is the basis? Basis is the horsepower of the machines, that is what we will take, HP of the machine. And HP of the machines is going to be in the ratio of 3 is to 2, 3 is to 3 is to 2. So 3 is to 2 out there. So that is going to be the what do you call it as the way in which I am going to distribute it. Very, very simple and straight. So it is going to be 800 into 3 divided by 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8. So 8 out here. And then this is going to be another 300, and then 600 is over. So this is going to be another 200 out there, straight and simple in this particular case. Then I say canteen. The canteen out here is about 500 out here. What is it? It's going to be only on the basis of number of workers out here. It is again, canteen is only going to be based on the number of workers out here. So I am going to use the same logic in this particular case. So that is it's going to be 500, it's going to be this 500 into 4 divided by 10 out here, divided by 10 out here. So it's going to be 200, and then it's again going to be what do you call it as 500 into what do you call it as 3 divided by 10 out here, then that is what it is. So this is going to be another 150 out here. So what happened? All these are service departments. I allocated it on one of the bases that is given in this particular sheet out there in the problem sheet. I just took it, I directly allocated it, and that is what we call it as a secondary distribution out here in this particular case out there. Now in the production department, as per summary, what is the production department cost out here? For A it is going to be about 15,000 as A, and then for B it is going to be about 13,000, and for C it is going to be 12,000. So the total out here for the production department was about 40,000 out here. So what is the total cost of each of the production department? Total cost of each of the production department, nothing is going to happen. It just going to, I am just going to sum it up out here. I am just going to basically sum it up out here in this particular case, 17,100, and then so on and so forth. You can also verify your total out here. You can verify your total also out here, and that is going to be, this is going to be here out here 44,800. You can verify that whether it basically what you have done is perfectly all right. Yes, it is perfectly all right, 44,800, and that is what it is. So what did we do? Simple secondary allocation on some basis out there. On some basis we directly took it and directly allocated it. That is what we call it as a secondary distribution. I am going to highlight it in red out there. We have not done any primary. We will do the primary and the secondary as we go to the next illustration out here, as we go to the next illustration in this.